ladies and gentlemen, hello, and welcome back once again to the Operational Intelligence Market Overview here at InsideAnalysis.com. My name is Eric Cavanaugh. I'll be your moderator for today's demonstration. And folks, we are very happy to have one of the leaders in the whole operational intelligence space with us today, a company called Splunk. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard about them. We'll be hearing from Joe Fitzpatrick and Pete Elke about what's going on over there. So with that, gentlemen, I turn it over to you. The floor is yours.
So Splunk was founded to pursue a disruptive vision, and that vision was make machine data accessible, usable, and valuable to everybody. Machine data is one of the fastest growing and most pervasive segments of big data, and it's pretty much generated by all the applications, websites, servers, networks, mobile devices, sensors, and RFID assets that drive a business. By monitoring, analyzing, and visualizing machine data, Splunk helps organizations transform it into valuable insights regardless of the industry they're in. And that's what we call operational intelligence. To Splunk, operational intelligence demands a fundamentally different approach than traditional analytic architectures. It requires that the underlying technology be real-time, highly scalable, and have the flexibility to handle the growing diversity of data. With operational intelligence, organizations can improve the performance of their applications. They can streamline business processes, enhance security, and drive the customer experience, and basically deliver, significant value across both IT, operations, and the business.
Okay, good. And I think we're going to get a demo now from Pete. So Pete,
Terrific.
show us what you got.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate it. So what we're looking at is the basic web interface to Splunk. And what we're going to go through here is a demonstration of Splunk's capabilities for bringing raw machine data through analytics and into an operational intelligence profile that's appropriate for various audiences through the business, from operations individuals through sales, marketing, and through the executive team as well. All intelligence and dashboards and reports driven off of the same basic sets of machine data. In this example, what we're looking at is a mobile telephone provider. This telco has implemented a service whereby their customers can listen to music directly on their phones through the cellular network. And what we're interested in looking at is in how that service is performing across the board, how sales are operating, how new promotions may be working out, how the back end is working, all of those various kind of components that go into an operational intelligence footprint. So within this company, what we're going to be looking at is basically three different kinds of logs. There are radius logs, which provide authentication information. There's log files from web servers that tell us about the music that's been downloaded. And we've got business process management logs. Now, within the business process management stuff, there's all kinds of very interesting semantic information that's highly relevant to the interests of the executive teams, the marketing teams, the sales teams, and the product development teams. So we'll go ahead and start to look at some of that data. If we go ahead and watch the data as it arrives in real time here, what you'll see is a very typical mishmash of what looks to be fairly confusing. What looks to be a fairly confusing set of data as it's flowing in. What Splunk allows us to do, though, is apply some logic to those events to separate them out and make them more intelligible to the user. So what we're looking at here is just some of the business process logs. And if we look at these things and sort of mouse over them, what we'll see is that Splunk has parsed those and figured out that within each one of these business process events, there is a set of key value pairs. And within each one of those, we've identified, what the individual bits of relevant information are, and allowed us to drill into those. So what we're going to do here in this log is just separate down into just the information that's coming through from iPhones And what we see here, again, is that Splunk has figured out within each one of these events a whole host of really interesting information, things that are meaningful to us. And say, for example, what we're interested in looking at here is people who have just bought new iPhones. So Splunk allows us to find that, click through, and now we're just looking at logs of people who have just bought iPhones. That's reasonably interesting in and of itself, but what might be fairly interesting to us is to find out what kind of iPhones people are buying. So we can click here, drill through, and very quickly produce a reasonably appropriate pie chart that shows us the breakdown of the devices that we're selling over the last hour. Now, that's fairly interesting for an ad hoc kind of investigation purposes or troubleshooting or things like that. But realistically, that kind of investigation isn't what executives and sales and marketing professionals might be really interested in looking at. So Splunk allows us to have to display that data in much more interesting formats for more sophisticated audiences. So using that same data that we were just looking at here, I can now project on a map of the United States, for example, where we're selling our phones. And we can drill in here. We've enriched this data with the zip code that the individual customers are living in, and we can see how things are selling across the country. We can further break that down by our network providers. So this particular cellular company obviously subcontracts out transit to Clearwire or to Sprint, and we can see as an executive where and how we're selling those sorts of things. If I'm interested in market data or plan type kind of data, I can look through these through this kind of interface and find exactly the same thing. All of this has been driven by that raw machine data that we saw up front, enriched with external data from a zip code database and displayed on a map.
That is really impressive stuff. So help me understand underneath, like, what are the data sources where you're getting this information, and how much time does it take to piece this all together such that we can get this view?
So the data sources underneath this are merely the log files that we looked at earlier, right? Enriched with a zip code database, and then displayed on a Google Maps mashup. So there's nothing that we haven't seen that goes into this. Most customers eventually want to put together an interface very much like this. The Maps kind of interfaces seem to be very compelling for executive audiences, and most of those get done in under a morning. This is maybe a couple hours work for a typical Splunk administrator to put together.
And let's talk about the different zones. So let's say I want to drill into 182, which is coming out of Maryland perhaps, or somewhere over there. What can I see underneath there?
So in this interface, as we have it configured right now, we can only drill in. We're only drilling into the geolocation data just to see the numbers of sales that have happened in this particular zip code. With a little bit more magic rolled into it, we might be able to provide you with custom reports clicking through that would show you, for example, the individual customers maybe who had purchased in that area, or metrics and telemetry about how long their transactions took or the products that they bought, all of those sorts of things. It's simply a matter of configuring the action that follows when you click.
I see. And so that's where a developer comes, or a Splunk administrator, as you describe it, comes into play. They talk to the end user who is using the tool from a visual sense. They get a better feel for additional data sets they want. and they'll go ahead and basically prepare the process, or are they defining a business rule or an action in some sort of syntax, or what does the Splunk administrator actually do?
So underneath the covers, the Splunk administrator will end up taking the business logic and expressing it in a Splunk query language.
Okay.
Okay. So, for example, in this case, what we're looking at is music downloads. So I'm going to go ahead. I know that people are interested in understanding the flow of people downloading music off their phone. Well, that requires data from two different sources. I know as a Splunk administrator that we have to tie together data from our Radius logs that has the user information and data from the web server logs that has the download information and combine those into a single transaction. So as a Splunk administrator, then I would take that business logic and express that in a query language very much like this. And now what I've done is I have stitched together logs that don't have any common information within them and use those to express meaningful business logic at a higher level of abstraction.
Sure. And I noticed how, as you mentioned even, you're going over different bits and pieces of this log data and it's highlighting. What can you do with that process? Meaning, can you right-click on one of those, get more information about the nature of that field, save various bits of metadata about that perhaps, or comments or notes, or what can you do from this particular view of the information with respect to these individual bits of log data?
Absolutely. So in this particular set of information, again, what Splunk has done, and everything that I highlight here, Splunk has noticed as a field that may be meaningful to the end user. And so just natively clicking through on, for example, this field, what I'm going to get is all of the records that include anyone downloading this particular piece of music. Now, if we want to enhance that logic and enhance those workflows to, say, reach out to some other system, reach out to a ticketing system, for example, to see if there's been any trouble tickets that have been generated that reference this particular piece of music, we can do that sort of thing as well, and that's something that's a Splunk administrator task.
And so here's a fairly specific question. I can see that you're showing different browsers that are being used, and obviously these days with e-commerce in particular, we're dealing with an incredibly heterogeneous environment between browsers and operating systems and latencies and all kinds of various things. And one of the real difficulties for the end user is that functionality differs from one browser and OS to another. That could be very difficult in terms of just trying to buy products or even download songs, or if you buy a new Mac, for example, and you're trying to do what you normally do on your PC, things don't work the same. Do you see use cases around being able to very quickly identify problems with specific browsers and then alert somebody who is in the web development department to, hey, we've got a problem with this new version of Firefox, can you please get in touch with them and see what's going on, such that you can resolve those problems very quickly?
Well, Eric, I'm really glad that you asked me that question, because I've got the perfect case for you here. At this particular cell phone company, one of the canned dashboards that we have written for an executive and marketing audience is related to downloading music, right? So one of the things that we have separated out is failed downloads, and we're looking at what kind of phones were unable to download music during this particular time period. And it happens that in this particular time period, everybody that had a failure downloading music was running on an iPhone. And what I can do is I can click through to that iPhone result and see the raw log events that generated that. And we see here all of the download failures. They all happen to be running iPhones. And what I can do then is I can note that within this data we've noted that the user agent, which is technical speak for what browser was the individual running, the user agent is one of the fields that we've picked up on. And I can highlight on that, and I happen to notice that 100% of the downloads that are failing for this particular service are failing for iPhones that happen to be running iOS 5.01. And so then I can immediately turn around and talk to our web development shop or our operations shop and go, look, guys, we have a problem with iOS 5.01. Let's go figure out what that is and deliver a solution back out as soon as we possibly can.
That is really quite impressive. And this list along the left-hand side, you got 3 selected fields, 21 interesting fields. Obviously, that's dynamically generated by Splunk as it's basically ingesting all these different sources of log data, right?
That's correct. We'll look at the data as it comes in and parse it and look for things that look like fields and present those to you. We also give you the ability to define your own fields if there are things within your data that are sort of business idiosyncratic or non-obviously parsed. We obviously will give you the ability to define, 17 characters in after the first AAA in this log file, go 3 characters to the left, read 9 characters, and that's your field foobar.
Right. That's great. And so let me ask you very quickly, how do you deploy this solution? Let's say somebody says, yes, I see the magic, I want this stuff. You guys come on site, and what do you do? Is there a box that you basically install in the network, or do you manually have to make connections to all the different systems that are going to be accessed, or what?
So Splunk is a software-based solution. Software runs on all of the common platforms, Windows, Linux, and many variants of Unix. There is an agent, effectively, that will reside on devices from which you wish to collect logs. So if you have Windows servers throughout your infrastructure or Unix or Linux servers, we'll have you install the Splunk forwarder. It's a very lightweight, very unobtrusive piece of software that will read log files or other data that you're interested in and forward that to a Splunk Splunk instance that's called an indexer. Splunk indexers scale horizontally very seamlessly, so you can have as many of those as is needed for your data volume and your search volume. And once data is flowing in, then through this web interface or through a command line interface or through a REST API, if you're more development oriented, you start querying that data and producing results, reports, dashboards, alerts, and other things like that.
Right, and you say horizontally scalable. I'm guessing that's through some kind of MPP?
So Splunk, at its core, is actually implemented as a MapReduce technology.
Oh, okay.
So we will add, as you add indexers into the pool of search peers that we talk to through our search interface, that capacity simply grows linearly with the indexers that you add into the pool.
Very interesting. That's great stuff. My goodness. I can see why you guys are getting some traction. This has been fantastic. Folks who've been taking a briefing from Pete Elke and Joe Fitzpatrick of Splunk. Well done, guys. This is great stuff.
Thank you, and we encourage you and anyone else to download Splunk for free at splunk.com and find out how quickly you can turn machine data into insight and dashboards.
Yeah, well, I find this very interesting for a whole variety of reasons, one of which is because this seems to me highly emblematic of a new breed of tools that just basically cuts right to the chase, where I come from the sort of traditional business intelligence environment. People think in terms of a data warehouse where, of course, you siphon all this data into a warehouse, you build applications on top of it, and you have some analysis, whereas what this has now done, it seems to me, is come full circle, where this is happening in near real time or real time. You don't have to think in this sort of old world warehousing, create the reservoir of data kind of mindset. I'm guessing you guys would agree with that?
Well,
absolutely. I think that's, I mean, you hit it right on, and that's one of the big, people see, I mean, in a way, Splunk is very complementary to BI, but in a way, it's completely different from that just because of exactly what you mentioned, real time, extremely fast time to value, scaling across very large data sets. I mean, all those things make this technology very unique.
Ask any question.
Ask any question. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. One of our founders says that, with Splunk, all you need is a browser and your imagination. And, it's true. The way our customer use cases go, I mean, it's fascinating. We didn't get a chance to cover some of the use cases, but, I mean, it's just absolutely mind-boggling, some of the use cases that we have.
Yeah, and I will say, here's my personal prediction. So I think over the next few years, we're going to see a merging and a sort of hybrid environment between this kind of operational intelligence analysis and what we've gotten from data warehousing and business intelligence. But so far as I can see, an organization like Splunk or just a few of these others that I've seen that are doing very interesting things. SQL Stream is one of them, for example. Okunu is very interesting. Extra Hop Networks, Sumo Logic, a bunch of these companies are really jumping on top of what's happening. And it seems to me that if you guys just focus a bit of attention on maintaining historical metrics and allowing discovery and management of that environment, someday that'll be the data warehouse.
Yeah, we certainly think so.
Well, wow, this has been great, folks. Thank you so much for your time and attention, ladies and gentlemen. You've been listening to another vendor overview in the operational intelligence market overview for InsideAnalysis.com. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.
Thanks.